Not My Family is a highly fictionalized, loosely autobiographical narrative that describes generational bad will, poor choices, financial malfeasance, and even murder. The generational craziness is propagated like a tidal wave, threatening to drown everything in the deluge. Secrets are buried deep in lies, pacts sealed in blood, the truth concealed unto death, just to exert some control. I hate rubberneckers. It's kind of like, or this book is kind of like rubbernecking. The 30-mile pileup or 30-car pileup on I-75. You want to look away, but you're drawn to the carnage. Join me as the protagonist progresses along self-discovery and she recreates her identity and she discovers how to go home again. Not My Family can be purchased at FeliciaBaxter.com or directly from the author. Just navigate to Facebook, look up Dale's Angels Inc. and click Buy Now for your autographed copy. Now, let's return to the podcast. Today is the 18th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. I remember exactly where I was that day. I was in my fatigues, combat boots, permed hair, and I'm known as Tennessee Fro now, but I remember distinctly going between the patients and asking the nurse practitioner, was this an accident? And she's like, of course not. This was a terrorist attack. Terrorist attack at its purest. I remember standing in the waiting room, watching the first tower and then the second plane hit. I remember the plane hitting the Pentagon. I remember the other plane crashing. I just remember being terrified because I was on a military base, because I was actually in the military at the time. And then I remember getting very angry. How dare these people come on our ground and attack us? I remember watching the towers fall. I remember seeing all of the first responders running and the people running towards death. And I just remember getting so angry. I remember being so angry as sitting in traffic for 8 hours just trying to get on base. I remember not being able to fly anywhere because I was actually supposed to go to New York City for my first race for the cure on the East Coast. I just remember being appalled and then being just so pissed off, and how cowardly and how it was just so awful. And I was just, how dare you attack us? We didn't do anything to you. We just live in our lives. I'm so sorry. It sucks where you live, but How dare you? And in recognition of those things, I wanted to do this part of the segment of the show because even 18 years later, we're still seeing the fallout of those attacks. When those towers crash, there's just so many things that the first responders are still having to live with, and it's killing them off. The CDC and World Health Organization basically has told us that there are over 241 NYPD officers that have died from 9/11 related illnesses. What are those illnesses? Of course, there's PTSD, closed head injuries, but there are also a lot of neurodegenerative processes as well as rare tumors and cancers that they're having to deal with. Burkitt's, diffuse non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, large cell lymphoma, follicular nodular non-Hodgkin's, to name a few. There is issues with the colon, esophagus, and the rest of the GI tract. There are issues with their eyes. There's a higher incidence of breast cancers in the female survivors. And the list goes on and on. You can actually navigate to cdc.gov/WTC/conditions to find out the list of those conditions that are associated with the first responders and any of the other survivors that were on ground zero at the time. And we'll never forget, we won't be sheep. And we need to protect our own. And just of note, it took almost an act of Congress to refund in perpetuity the World Trade Center First Responder Relief Fund because it was held up by that jackass from Kentucky. But I think their terms are actually coming up, and we need to be very cognizant and watch the two congressmen that basically held up the funding of this relief. These guys put their lives on the line. They're dying off faster than the general public, and all they did was serve the people of New York in our country. They need to be taken care of. They and their families need to be taken care of. So for you to hold up those funds looking for alternatives is phony, and it's awful, and you need to be ashamed of themselves. And I keep going back to this. My worst time in my life was when I actually worked in Kentucky, and I'm blessed that and I'm hopeful to never have to go back there again unless I visit a Jim Beam plant. I'm just saying. But this goes to them. I wish them, and I want to tell them of my greatest gratitude, and it is an honor that you served the people of New York and your semblance of bravery for these United States. And I thank you for your service. Welcome to another episode of Tennessee Medical Minute. Hi, I'm your host, Felicia Baxter. In this week's episode, I will be discussing some updates and my little tidbits of knowledge I want to drop on your healthcare and coverage. That means what's going on in the insurance realm. I'll talk about an update on Hannah's Corner and why turmeric is the bomb. Uh, I'll also go over previous segment updates and important alerts as far as precision medicine, updates on technology, and what's going on in general in healthcare news. And then I'll end it with talking about the new resurgence of syphilis. Actually, syphilis never went away, of all things. And as always, don't forget to navigate to www.dalesangelsinc.com to find out what's going on as far as nerd news and what I'm reading in general. And I hope you enjoy this episode. Thanks. Welcome back to the program, and I want to make sure everyone is clear that I really want to keep this to a minute. Most people cannot stand or focus on being talked to death beyond about 20 to 30 minutes, most adults anyway, so I am going to keep my language clear and as succinct as I possibly can. I may change the naming of the section or the part of the segment that I'm speaking of, but I'll try to keep it simple and succinct as possible. This part of the show is just about healthcare and your coverage. For example, two things I want to play into this for the general public. It is imperative that at times you review your coverage and your benefits, making sure that whichever provider that you have, may be it a medical provider or definitely a dental provider, that they are submitting to the correct part of your coverage. Most of us that work in the corporate world have medical, dental, and vision. They are three separate policies, cover three separate things. And you have to be careful that you're not getting billed for erroneous charges, nor are your charges getting dropped because someone is billing the incorrect thing. If you're in a dentist's office, whether it's a periodontist, which is a gum surgeon, or a dental surgeon, probably make sure you have dental coverage and they submit to, if your procedure is specifically for a dental procedure, please make sure they submit it under that particular, whoever is covering your dental. It would seem like it's a simple thing, but in my day-to-day, I'm seeing more and more where people are submitting dental procedures through the medical insurance provider. Completely different. Also, what I'm also seeing as doing what I do on a day-to-day basis is, this harkens back to my day in healthcare IT and all of the training and the installs that we did on documentation. If you want to tick off an insurance company, what I'm going to describe next is going to make a lot of sense, because we're not going to pay for that. I'm just going to put that out there. What we will not pay for is a 11 to 12 page document that has one sentence that identifies the patient, a series of vital signs, a series of lab results, a series of interpretation of imaging, and then you sign it. That's not a note. It does not tell me truthfully the severity or acuity of the patient and why we should pay for a prolonged hospital stay. What that is going to tell me is we're going to getting ready to have a denial, and somebody's going to need to talk to me before they're going to pay for that stay, that episode of care. That means if you don't document it, it didn't happen, and don't leave it to us to have to figure out all of that data, because in its raw sense and raw state, it means nothing unless it's interpreted, and it has to be interpreted by the primary team that's taking care of the patient before we can say we're going to appropriately pay for it. We can't tell if it's appropriate care or not because we don't know what it all means. So, and that's my 2 cents on Jack, on poor documentation. So the 2 things I would like you to learn from this particular segment: take the time to intermittently review your coverages, making sure that you have coverage for what your needs are, and then going back to the facilities and the providers. You need to document what you mean and mean what you say before the insurance companies will actually pay for it. Well, as I become more and more and I get paid more and more to work, I get to practice my craft in many different ways. I've published my own book, I update my blog, and I also publish this podcast. But what's going to keep it all moving smoothly is when I get other paid assignments. Well, I wrote this copy for a very useful cleaning device that I first became aware of when I stayed with a colleague of mine in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I had no idea that the company or they're manufactured right down the road in Dalton, Georgia. But it's a great, a very perfect addition to any cleaning buff or OCD person. It's called Peachy Clean. And I am going to read you the copy that I wrote because I'm kind of proud of it, and I thought it was actually pretty good. I'm what you could call a self-described scrubaholic, which makes my relationship with the Peachy Clean scrubber a bit eccentric, but that makes sense because a scrubber does have a personality disorder. It looks like a sponge, but kicks butt as a heavy-duty scrubber. The lattice work of the silicone gives it the feel of a sponge and allows it to hold soap and water more readily. It also gives it the durability that keeps it from permanently damaging your ceramic stove tops or scrape that unique non-stick surface on expensive cookware. And when it's paired with the non-abrasive disinfectant, it makes quick work of the soap and scum in your bathroom. And you ever notice that stench emanating from that sponge, like the dust from Pigpen and the Peanuts cartoon? It's the perfume made up of the byproducts of mildew and pathologic bacteria that are having a love fest in the sponge. The bacterial brothel, yes, I stole that from a different writer, raging within those holes and crevices of traditional sponges that make them absorbent are the condos of salmonella, slime-causing, smelly, dangerous organisms. But the Peachy Clean scrubber with that silicone matrix allows it to scrape off burnt food and particles, rinse away pesticides, all without leaving a sticky film. It is one of the best on the market and economical, with benefits of durability with pots and pan scouring, but also soft enough not to scratch up your delicate surfaces or bruise your fruit and vegetables. Repeat cleaning will get you about 2 or 3 months of odor-free, heavy-duty usage. It's so reasonably priced that you'll easily be able to replace it. And literally, it's locally sourced, y'all. It's right down the road from Chattanooga in the state of Georgia. For those of us that require an A-plus health department grade cleaning of our kitchens and bathrooms, this guaranteed odor-free scrubber paired with surface-specific cleaning solutions is the one to beat. So join other scrubberholics as we keep it clean and keep it fresh with Peachy Clean Scrubber. Now, back to the podcast. Welcome back to the segment. Listen, this is just going to be a quick update on what I've learned from my niece, Hannah Bonanna. She actually hipped me to a facial rub or a facial scrub, which is a combination of turmeric and honey. Um, and I also added mud so it won't be so drippy. But anyways, the active ingredient that gives turmeric is anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties is curcumin, which is the active ingredient. It's been there has been shown uh, in medical news today that it could play a great role in the management of rheumatoid arthritis. But turmeric has been used for ages in alternative and complementary medicine. But as in anything, before you add turmeric or any other herbal or alternative remedy to your regimen, please consult with your doctor first. And also, I want you to go and navigate to my blog and take a look at the before and after pictures because I've actually used it uh, recently to decrease the puffiness and the darkness underneath my eyes. And I hope the picture does it justice because I've noticed a smoothing of the lines in my forehead as well as the puffiness under my eyes. So, and if you think that there is a difference or you have some positive experiences with this particular herbal remedy, please drop me a line at TennesseeFroisreading@gmail.com, or you can leave a voicemail at 423-463-0658, or there's a new link that allows you to leave a 30-second or less than 30-second comment to this as well as anything else that I've said at deb.app.link/question post equals 1626. That is deb.app.link/question post equals 1626. And I can't wait to hear from you guys. And if you have something to say and it's not trolly, I may actually even play it on the webcast. Thanks. So welcome back to this part of the segment. Hot topics in health news, updates on vaping, and this week's subject, which is the syphilis resurgence. Actually, never went away. Well, I am a follower of technology, bio news, as well as precision medicine. But there is an update that, or a white paper that has been recently released. There's a forecast of from 2018 to 2023, and evidently precision medicine is big business. In particular, in the subjects of or the specialties of oncology, neuroscience, immunology, and respiration or respiratory medicine. The diagnostics and therapies associated with those subspecialties are predicted to be very profitable in the next several years. And I think anyone that wants to expand their either investment or just the interest in those areas, they should look as far as what's coming down the pipeline as far as diagnostics and therapeutics for those particular specialties. There has been an update as far as vaping. We've recorded our sixth death associated with vaping, and I seriously think, as I stated last week, I think it could be a combination of some type of contamination with they did not uh, predict with the heating of either CBD oil or nicotine in general. I think it may be a direct toxicity where you're getting just super high levels of both THC and nicotine at the cellular level, and that's causing the toxicity that we're seeing in all of these people. And what it could also be is something additive. There are 10 million people that evidently vape in this country. And I think what is happening is as they become more addicted and they vape even more, they're getting these super high concentrations of toxins and as well as nicotine and THC at the alveoli that's causing this damage that we're seeing on the pulmonary level. I think if they did the autopsies or they just looked at this a little bit closely, they would actually find this. The bottom line is you shouldn't vape. Uh, Michael Bloomberg, who I absolutely respect, came out this past week, um, and his foundation is going to put over $100 million to stopping vaping in young people. And then, of course, the shyster or the low-level thug that Michael Bloomberg came out and said that Trump came in and said that they're going to ban flavored vaping in the United States. Um, but the bottom line is, I think that it's out of the bag. Vaping is not safe. I think it's not safe for a variety of reasons. And this sixth death is just support of that. Just don't start, and they need to stop. And just like we held big tobacco responsible for all of the deaths that we're seeing from emphysema and lung cancer, and now also big pharma and the opioid crisis, I think these vaping industry and the company Juul is going to be held responsible for all of this nonsense that we're seeing now. And FDA needs to be ashamed of themselves. They weren't supposed to. They moved up their review of this, and they were truly considering that this was an alternative to get people to stop smoking. No, it's not an alternative to get people to stop smoking. We have safer means to do that. This is a way not only to keep people hooked on nicotine, it's to expand nicotine's addiction. You can't tell me that. And you need to be ashamed of yourself. That's who I'm giving a side eye to this week and every coming week. That CEO of Juul saying this is an alternative to smoking. It's not safe. And they need to stop. Um, and that goes also into Purdue Pharma of the OxyContin craze. They're getting ready. They're probably going to be filing for bankruptcy if they have not already. And they said that that was going to put a kibosh or decrease the payouts of all of the lawsuits because they do their shady tactics again in advertising and downplaying the addictive nature of their OxyContin. They're actually being held responsible for the opioid crisis in this country. Um, I wonder what people actually think and say about that because um, I think they did whoever their advertisement media team was, they basically followed what they were directed to do, and it also got an entire a generation or two hooked on this powerfully addictive drug, and right behind that, fentanyl, which is even more dangerous. And last but not least, and as an answer to Healthcare 2020, um, should we just scrap Medicare? Should we scrap private insurers? No, I think we need a hybrid of it. The best insurance I actually had is what I was able to purchase off of the exchanges when I was in between jobs, and it was the bronze plan from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. It gave me great coverage. I was relatively healthy, wasn't as fat as I was as I am now, but it actually had extremely great coverage and was only like a quarter of what I was paying in Cobra. Um, Coverage like that that's not going to bankrupt the payer, but it's going to give me what I actually need. That type of system is what we actually need at this time. We can't keep continuing to go where we are, and Medicare in its current form is going to bankrupt us. We need good coverage, basic coverage, and then add-ons based on how you're able to pay. And also the usage of data and population health to manage those populations that are just sicker and that are going to need different and varied coverage. And that's my take on what we should be focusing on. And then last but not least, I wanted to focus on syphilis because this is one of those old school venereal diseases or sexually transmitted diseases that you don't really hear about so often. But I actually did a review recently on a patient with tertiary syphilis. Basically, syphilis is one of those sexually transmitted diseases that is highly susceptible to penicillin. People may know of it from its notoriety, what the Tuskegee experiment, where an entire generation of black men were withheld treatment for over 30 years so they could actually see the progression of this disease um, to its end, which is death. It is spread by a bacteria, a spirochete. And if you go back and look to the thumbnail for this particular segment, that's an artist's rendition of electron microgram of that particular bacteria. There are three forms of it. Primary syphilis, you get a sore somewhere on your genital area, whether it's your penis, vagina, or even your anus. Secondary syphilis, there is a skin rash that could almost look like the measles. You get swollen lymph nodes and fever. Sometimes it can be mild, and sometimes there are no symptoms in latent secondary stage. And then there is the tertiary syphilis, which you get the severest form, which can cause brain damage, heart problems, and other multi-organ failure. And it can be transmitted to your baby, and it can cause serious debility in the infant. They can either be born, it can cause spontaneous abortion or stillborn. It could cause snuffles. It can cause blindness. It can cause issues with their bones. But it's the neurosyphilis that's actually can mimic meningitis and also dementia and paralysis. And you have to have a high suspicion of it if it's a relatively young person or even an older person, because this could show up 10 to 20 years after your initial infection. The issue is, even at tertiary stage, it can still be cured if you're just tested and appropriately treated with penicillin, either bicillin or which is the injectable form. And I don't think if you have like second or tertiary, if you can actually be treated with oral penicillin, is you have to be treated with the injection. But highly preventable form of dementia or delirium. And it's still very, very common in this country and still very susceptible to penicillin. People, I don't know, it just seems like the medical establishment until recently has forgotten about it. but it should be high up on your radar. A sexually active person, consider this in a young person that presents with signs of either meningitis or dementia. And that wraps up this episode of Tennessee Fro's Medical Minute. Join me next week as I explore other updates in technology as well as what's going on in healthcare news. Um, don't forget to navigate to www.dellsangelsinc.com and find out all the nerd news, what I'm reading, and what other interesting things are going on in technology. If you like what you heard and you actually want to leave a comment, please drop me a line at TennesseeFroIsReading@gmail.com. You can leave a voicemail at 423-463-0658. It'll cut you off at 2 minutes. No trolling messages, please. Or you can actually navigate to deb.app.link/question post equals 1626 to leave an 30-second comment on this as well as any of the other episodes from Tennessee Fro. And I would like to hear from you. And if your message is not trolly, I will actually play it online. And if you also like what you hear and you want to leave a tip, you can also navigate to my PayPal page and put 5 on it. Most of my posts are now behind the paywall, and you have to be a subscriber to actually get premium content, but you can still leave a tip at paypal.me/Felicia DAI if you like what you hear and you want to continue to support this premium content. And I would just like to hear from you. Thank you for listening, and I hope you guys have a great evening.